It's time again for the Insiders with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association and the Tommy G. Thompson Center on Public Leadership.
Hi, I'm Chuck Chvala, former Senate Majority Leader.
And I'm Scott Jensen, former Assembly Speaker.
So Scott, we're the Insiders. So Scott, primaries are over. What does that do in your view does it make the race better for Republicans? Where are the key spots? Give me your take on it.
Well, there were a lot of hotly contested primaries, but I don't think any of them are actually were in seats that will determine the outcome of the fall elections as to which party controls both houses. Most of the hot primaries were in safe Republican or safe Democratic seats. There are just a couple that weren't. In the state assembly, I think there's an open seat in the Green Bay area where Ben Franklin won the election. Ben's back on the campaign trail. This Ben Franklin actually is a local businessman with a couple hundred employees. I think he's a really strong candidate for Republicans in that seat. So they got the stronger of the two candidates there. In the same general area in Senate District 18, which is kind of Appleton area, a seat that's probably going to go to the Democrats. The Republicans did get the better nominee out of that one in Dr. Phillips. He's a cancer doctor. He's beloved in the area by lots of people whose lives he's transformed. And so I think that was the best candidate. But other than that, in most cases, the races that will determine in the fall which party controls the legislature, there weren't hotly contested primaries. We start out with maps that are 50-50 in both houses, but huge Republican majorities in both chambers. Those numbers are going to come down dramatically. The question is, can the Dems bring it down far enough to actually get control in either house? I think that's unlikely coming out of these races. The Democrats will have more money in the fall elections, but the Republicans have the advantage of incumbency. It's quite common for your local legislator to run 3 or 4 points ahead of the top of the ticket. And the top of the ticket in Wisconsin is likely to be a 50-50 race this year. So the Democrats will pick up seats in both houses of the legislature, but not enough to get the majority. That's my prediction.
I think that's a safe statement, but I can say this. For the first time in the last couple of weeks, for the first time that I've been talking to the insiders on the Democratic side, there's actually talk that they believe there is a realistic chance of getting a majority. Not a likely chance, but a realistic chance. And I think what's going on is they're just seeing this enthusiasm, which is going to drag a lot of additional people out. It's going to mean a lot more young people, and those are the marginal areas where universities are that are going to make a difference for Dems. So I think that's important. On the primary side, I think the good thing for Greta Neubauer and the Democrats in the Assembly, they managed to they did a great job recruiting up front. And they avoided a lot of primaries. And even where they had a couple that came out, they got a woman coming out of it. And I think all other things being equal, the Dems in the Assembly and the Senate would rather have a woman because it is going to be about abortion. And those women will be able to carry that message more strongly. With regard to the Senate, that's another example of really, as Scott was kind of saying, there isn't so much of an impact to the primaries. So let me give you a good example. The Democrats were able to get individuals who did not face primaries in the big four. Wow, Sarah Kieski, Jamie Wall up in Green Bay, Jody Havish-Seneca in the burbs, and then Chris Alfheim up in Appleton, Oshkosh. They didn't have primaries. So the Republicans could have had a primary, for example, down in that Milwaukee suburban seat, but instead they managed to get Knodel to run for the Assembly, and he did win. And then so they got the other. But here's the problem for Republicans. I think the Senate is teed up nicely. They're unlikely to get to a majority, although, by the way, some people are talking about the 10th Senate district now maybe being in play with Walz out there, and with the fact that it used to be a Democratic seat at one time. And, I can see Scott not buying that argument. But I can tell you this. I think the Democrats are confident that they can win all 4 of the seats that they have out there otherwise. Probably the toughest seat on the numbers will be Jody Havish-Seneca in the 8th. But the advantage there is that the Republican incumbent, and Scott is right, incumbents tend to run a little better than people who haven't been on the ballot. But in this case, Dewey Strobel's only been on about 10% of that district. And he is not Knodel. And that's a problem for the Republicans. Knodel was a much more user-friendly, sound like a moderate guy. Dewey Strobel is a take no prisoners kind of Republican. He's a right winger. That is not going to serve him well in that suburban area where a woman candidate in the burbs talking about abortion. Ooh, I don't like the dynamics there for the Republicans. I like them very much for the Democrats. So I think Scott is right. The primary was kind of a non-event in many ways, but I am now hearing from Democrats with the enthusiasm that's out there, but not just people who are off the street, but people who know their stuff. There are people saying 50 is a possibility in the Assembly. I don't think the majority is achievable in the Senate, but possible in the Assembly.
Yeah, that would be an amazing swing. I think in Wisconsin politics, the last time we had a swing of more than 14 seats, which is what the Democrats need in the state assembly, would have been the 1970 election, where the Democrats took the legislature away from Republicans who had pushed a sales tax increase, oddly enough. So that's only 54 years ago. You have to go back for an example of a swing that big. I think that's very, very unlikely here. I do think the Republicans will lose seats in both houses of the legislature. Personally, I think in the state Senate, they're likely to lose 1 or 2. That's it. And 5 is what the Democrats need there. In the state assembly, they need 14. Actually, they need more than 14. So I just think that's just not even close to likely in the state assembly. I think they'll come back with 55 seats, probably the Republicans. And that's enough for Robin Vos to continue as Speaker and for Devin LeMahieu to continue in this leadership in the state Senate.
I'll take the odds on both of those, and I think I'll win over Scott Jensen, and he'll be buying me dinner. And we'll make it in a very visible spot in Madison where Republicans may see it, and that'll be a dangerous swing for Scott. But I would say this.
To take you up on it.
The one thing I would say is that Scott is right in terms of history, in terms of the numbers. However, what's unprecedented here is to have such a really egregious partisan gerrymander that was upheld, not upheld, by the way, by the federal court here in Wisconsin that came at it, but ultimately was overturned so that this partisan gerrymander remained in place. That's never been there before. And that's the only reason why I believe it is achievable now with less partisan maps that still favor the Republicans a little bit. 50 is achievable, not likely, but 45, they're not going to be down at 45. And the Senate, they're not only going to win 2 seats. I guarantee you that. Let's replay this after the election, see who was right.
Absolutely. In the coming weeks, let's take a look individually at some of these races that'll determine the outcome.
I agree. Scott and I will have fun talking about this one. Have a good fall. Get that bowl of popcorn out. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to The Insiders with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association and the Tommy G. Thompson Center on Public Leadership.